Hey guys, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you, and I've got a pretty exciting blade today. This is the large Bodega from the Begg Steelcraft series. Sorry about the glare there. Trying to avoid it as best I can. There we go. Maybe that'll help. So, want to share this knife with you. I will say, you know, I've got a bit of a history with the Bodega. I have been interested in these for a very, very long time. This was one of the earlier sort of mid-tech or high-end knives that I learned about, and so, you know, I've even tried to buy one on a couple of occasions and things didn't work out. So when I heard that this was coming out, actually let me go back further, okay? When I heard that there was gonna be this production collaboration between Begg knives and Reate knives, the first thing that came to mind is, hey, there could be a really nice, more affordable Bodega. That'd be super exciting. And there was, but it was mini. So I was really disappointed in that. So when this one was announced for this year, I was pretty stoked about it and did pick one up fairly early on, although it took some time for my preferred retailer, which was Knives Ship Free, to get the exact configuration that I wanted. Okay, so that little background out of the way, you will know then that I really, really love this knife, and that will influence my review, no question. I will try to qualify, you know, I'll try to be especially objective, okay, as I go through this, to try to sort of balance out my love for this knife and not make this just a complete love fest of a video. Okay, so now that you've got my background with the Bodega out of the way and why I'm so excited about this knife, let's go ahead and start talking about the specifics of it and how all of that impacts the performance of the knife. All right, so size and weight on this guy, this is 8 7/8 overall. It's actually just a teeny bit more than that, but not really enough to care about. The blade on this guy is 3 3/4 inches, and you can see the cutting edge is pretty much the same as that. It would be a little bit more because of the curve, you probably know. 5 1/4 inch handle on this guy, so that's the closed length. And in terms of how well it carries, by the way, 6.4 ounces, which is pretty hefty, but it's a large knife. And in terms of how it carries, well, number one, it's not that thick, okay? You're only about 1/2 inch thick here. It's a fairly deep carry clip. Not, of course, a folded over one, or rather a milled titanium one, but because of the placement here, it carries fairly deep. And I even have pants where it won't, you know, this is so long that it actually, you know, kind of gets in the bottom of the pocket before the clip is fully used, so I kind of have to angle it a little bit. So it's a large knife, and it carries like a large knife, but honestly, guys, carrying this knife is a complete joy to me. So I'm just walking around grinning from ear to ear on the days that I'm fortunate to have this knife in my pocket. So although I understand it's a little heavy, I don't mind even in the slightest. Now let me say this, you know, for a big knife it carries well, and if I compare it to something like this Hinderer, you know, this knife is lighter, but it actually carries bulkier because it's a little thicker, it's a little rounder, and so when it comes to carry, this actually, you know, really objectively is not all that bad unless you're purely just objecting to the weight. And I really don't start to do that until we pass, you know, 7.5 ounces or so, where I start to go, whoa, this is too much. Okay, so that's size and weight on this guy. It is a large knife, okay? And you kind of know that going in. When you look at the numbers on paper, you go, wow, that is a big knife. But I like large knives, so that works quite well for me. The blade on this guy is absolutely gorgeous. It is hand-rubbed satin, so I'm trying to get you a good angle there where you can see that finish. Let's come over to this side. There you go. So, beautiful, beautiful hand-rubbed satin on this guy. Drop point, hollow ground S35 VN. You can see they've got a nice sort of flat portion here for the thumb that works really well when you go to choke up on the knife like that. Of course, it's a Begg knife, so you've got that fuller with the holes in it. Now, guys, I love that. I think it really adds a detail that I greatly appreciate to the knife. However, I understand totally that from a practical standpoint, that's a bit of a nuisance. Because if you're cutting, I don't know, a bunch of a bunch of fruit or something like that, there's no doubt that a bunch of crap and junk could easily get in that fuller. I've done quite a bit of cutting. My experience has been that because of the hollow grind, it pushes most things away before they can get in there. So I haven't really had any issues with gunk getting in there, largely because, you know, the grind ends here and it is a hollow grind, so it's sort of flaring out there and it's going to push most materials away. And that's been my experience. By the way, while we're talking about the blade, let's see here. Take a look. There is the Begg Steelcraft logo. And again, this blade is available. Oh, by the way, yeah, fairly thin behind the edge, and that's achieved through the hollow grind. And I do like hollow grinds for that reason. I'm getting fingerprints all over this. Let me just give it a quick rub down. There we go. And so it is a hollow grind and therefore nice and thin behind the edge, so really, really cuts nicely. And in fact, even though, you know, it's reasonably thick blade stock, it's not crazy thick, but it's fairly thick. This knife actually slices pretty well because it's a rather high hollow grind. It sort of gives that gentle curve that makes it easier sort of cutting through even soft stuff like tomatoes or cheese or whatever else. So in my mind, you know, the performance on this blade for me has been very, very good. Of course, S35VN is a great steel, you know, no complaints there whatsoever. The one thing I will say is there are some variations. I'm going to say this, and I could be wrong, so someone correct me in the comments if I get this a little bit backward. But I'm fairly certain that you can get DLC on the bevels or DLC on the flats and vice versa. So you could have satin flats, DLC bevels, or DLC or satin, wow. So you could do DLC on the flats or DLC on the bevels. Let's just leave it at that so I don't confuse myself any further. So that's the blade, and you know, overall guys, it's been very, very good, even though I do understand that some people are going to be put off by that fuller. And really, this is a pretty distinctive design, so there are going to be some people who are just put off by the design altogether. Likely that would be a person who doesn't like any of the Begg knives, because they all have that sort of Begg styling, okay? Now, let's go ahead, having talked about that blade, and I gotta say, you know, I like the hollow grind. I love the hand rubbed satin finish. It is absolutely beautiful. And so overall, this blade is a real win for me, especially with its size and with the extra ergonomic features with the choil and the nice flat spot for the thumb. I've got to say those things are really, really appealing to me. Let's move on now to lockup and deployment. So you can see it is a torque spit construction. You can see the lock bar there where the that fuller groove is, you know, the detail from the fuller is carried over into the lock bar. There's the relief cut there, fairly, you know, standard size relief cut, nothing spectacular to talk about. It does have, and you can see the back side of the screws here. So you can see that there is a lock bar stabilizer, or over travel stop, I guess, and stainless steel lock bar insert. And by the way, I'm gonna, since we're kind of on this, I'm gonna touch on that for a second. I do like the way this is done, where you just get the bottom half of the screws showing rather than these giant screw heads here. I really like when knives do that. I think, nope, sorry, I can't show you another example of that, but I do appreciate that as a detail. I do prefer when the screws are kind of hidden, or at least a little bit hidden. Now, the bearings on this, you can see down there the IKBS symbol. So these are caged ceramic bearings. Single row, which is, I mean, okay. The action on this is quite good, okay? The flipper tab has no sort of sharp stuff anywhere, but even with that said, I've never had any problem with slipping off of it. It, to me, feels like it wants to be light switched, but you can push button it, and that does allow you to preload it a little. The detent on this is pretty well perfect. You know, it could maybe be a little firmer, but for a guy like me who likes to flip a knife over and over again, and probably like many of you, that moderate detent is, you know, appreciated. And that's exactly what I would call it. I would call it a moderate detent. If you'd played with the Torrent from Reate knives, the detent on here is definitely firmer, and to me, just slightly preferred, okay? But I can't complain at all. The detent definitely works really, really well. And a lot of guys are going to say they would prefer this detent over the Torrent. They'd call the Torrent maybe a little too stiff, okay? So I totally get that. I prefer a slightly stiffer detent, but this one is definitely very, very good. So let's see, lockup and deployment. What do we got to say in terms of criticism? Really not much. The only thing I can say is the jimping here on the handle is maybe a little bit sharp, but not so much that I would ever complain about it. And maybe a little jimping on the flipper tab here could be appreciated, but again, not necessary. In my use of the knife, have I ever actually slipped off or felt like, you know, I can't deploy the knife? No, never happened. So, well, it may be something that I would, you know, nitpick a little. I really can't complain. Now, I will say this. One nice little thing here is that you can spidey flick this knife, or at least I can spidey flick this knife, or you can even roll it open using that fuller groove. And I do like that as a feature, especially on a larger knife. You know, if you're at a restaurant, and this often happens, okay, we'll go to McDonald's, let's say, and I'll have to cut up chicken nuggets or something like that for the kids. Well, generally speaking, in that scenario, I don't want to be flipping the knife open like this. I'd like to find a way that's just a little more discreet to open the knife, so I'll probably be more just doing the roll with my thumb, okay? But it is nice to know that you've got those extra opening features, even though it's primarily a flipper deployed knife, all right? Okay, so that's lockup and deployment. No big, I mean, it's a fairly standard way of doing, you know, a bearing pivot and a stainless steel lock bar insert. Most modern titanium frame lock folders are going to have those features, and so nothing sort of spectacular or mind-blowing there. What about the handle? Now this is where a lot of stuff is going on, guys. Okay, so this is a very, very detailed handle, and that's one of the things I like about it. I love this checkered pattern here with the nice satin finish in between. It really stands out. Gorgeous looking. You do have the little detail around the pivot. Now, of course, on the actual Bodega, this is an insert, often done in G10, so you're losing that on the Reate, but it's not the end of the world, although I will say this, it would be really cool to have seen this done with an insert. That would have been definitely a value-added feature for sure. Now let's talk about, I'm going to see if I can get a good way, there you go. So look at the anodized finish on the rest of the knife. You can see it a lot more over on this side. It's got this really sort of interesting stonewash anodization. There's a lot of depth there that really, really comes out as you sort of get the knife in the light. They're almost shining spots. So it's really, really a lot of detail going on with that finish. Absolutely well done. It makes, I think, you know, one, it tones down the blue just a little bit, which is one of the things I wanted, but it also adds a level of depth and detail that I find very, very attractive. Okay, so yeah, you can see that there. Really, really nicely done anodization on that knife. Of course, backspacer construction and the checked pattern from the sides is sort of carried over onto the backspacer. Someone comment down below if this is also done on the fan pattern. So there is another variation on this checked pattern. And to me, I did not like it at all. It really put me off of the other version, but there is sort of a, I'm going to call it a fan pattern that you can get on these. And I'd be interested to know if the fan pattern still has the checkering on the backspacer. All right, so Torx bit construction, backspacer, there is a nice bit of jimping on the back here that allows you really, really good purchase with your thumb. Some of the jimping on this knife, on the blade, on the lock bar, can be a little sharp, but I honestly, if you're going to put jimping on a knife, I would prefer it be a little sharper rather than softer. You know, you can, because, you know, it's too easy, in my opinion, to get that, to try and soften the jimping and end up making it useless. Okay, this jimping is definitely sharp enough to be useful, but it doesn't tear up your hands at all. Okay, so pretty good balance on that. I love the texturing that this check pattern, it's sort of like a 1911, gives. Really, really like that. There is a bit of a hot spot potentially. Now, when I'm actually using the knife, I can't, you know, my natural grip is just like this, and here there's no hot spot, but if I kind of roll my hand around this way or that way, it's a little unnatural, but if I do it, I can get a bit of a hot spot here from the jimping on the lock bar when I don't get that jimping kind of caught into the grooves of my finger there, which is where it normally lands. All right, so could potentially be a bit of a hot spot, especially if your hands are very different in size from mine. I wear a size large glove, so if you had really small hands, or maybe even really large hands that wrap sort of further around the knife, that jimping could land sort of on a soft spot on your hand and create a bit of a hot spot. Let's see, so we've talked about the texturing, we haven't talked about the milling. So if you take a look inside here, this knife is milled out, and they have done a really nice job of, it's a satin finish on the inside of the backspacer, and the inside of the handle is milled out to save some weight. And so yeah, that's a nice touch. It would be, you know, maybe we'd be looking at a 7.5 ounce knife or a 7 ounce knife instead of a 6.4 ounce knife if they hadn't done that. So I do really appreciate that little bit of attention to detail there and trying to save a little bit of weight even on a knife of this size, where it would be tempting to be like, well, forget it, the thing's stupid, really heavy anyway. All right. So let's see, I think we've touched everything that we care about. It is Torx construction, which is nice for taking your knife down. If you're going to take down a knife like this, make sure when you're doing that, you cover up those Torx bits with, you know, a bit of masking tape or something else to stop you from scratching up the knife. Let's bring in some comparisons, okay? And I've got quite a few comparisons from a fairly wide range. The couple of obvious ones would be the other knives made by Reate. So there is the Torrent. And there's the Epoch. Hold on, I haven't given myself enough room. The quality on these is going to be very, very similar. The attention to detail and the engineering, all of that stuff is very, very comparable here. Obviously, the amount of detail on these Steelcraft knives is above and beyond what you're getting with most of the Reate knives. But in terms of quality and action and those kinds of things, they're very comparable. I would say the Epoch, the detent, is a little more similar to the Bodega. The Torrent has a little stiffer detent that I do actually like a little bit better. Also, these guys are dual row ceramic bearings, while the Bodega is a single row, and it would be nice to see them go up to the double row on the Steelcraft knives, but I'm sure there's some question of cost there. But I mean, these are pretty expensive anyway, so to me it would make sense to go to the double row. In terms of size, obviously you can see that the Epoch would be a little more, you know, in keeping with what you'd want to carry, maybe a little more comfortable. The Torrent is probably more comparable, but even it is a fair bit smaller, okay? So there they are side by side. Let's pull in a couple of others. Now let's throw a bit of a curveball in here and talk about, you know, if you want a nicely done titanium frame lock out of China, Kaiser is doing very, very well. This, of course, you know, 3D machined G10, 3D machined titanium, so really, really comfortable in hand. Of course, this is a more carryable knife in terms of size and weight as well. S35VN steel on both of these, and of course the Kaiser is going to be a much, much more budget-friendly option. If you're watching this, you're probably interested in higher-end knives, so you know a Kaiser may be, you know, sort of the lower end of your interest. Let's pull in a hinderer. Everyone's familiar with the XM18. I had it on camera a minute ago, and there are a couple of reasons I want to bring this guy in. Number one, this is made in the US. It's still high-end production. This is made in China. You know, there are some little details that are nicer on here than what you're getting here. Now, this is of course made to be a more, you know, harder this knife is made to be sort of used and carried and really take more abuse than I would want to put this guy through, especially because of the finishes. But since we're on this theme, let's do a couple of other American companies. Here is the Olamic Cutlery, or Olamic Tactical Swift. Again, an amazing knife, wonderful design. Now this is much more carryable. It's lighter in weight. It is much smaller both in hand and in pocket. So this is a knife that's probably, you know, similar in quality, similar in cost certainly, but maybe a little more user-friendly in terms of a regular EDC carry knife. One other knife that's probably one of my most comparable to this, and another most loved knives. These would be on my short list, okay, of favorite knives. I don't know if I can call either one, and these are favorites for me, okay? They're there's a lot of appeal to both of these. But this, of course, is the Curtis F3. Again, USA made. Now, one thing I've got to say about the F3, guys, is if you watch carefully for Dave's Knife of the Day stuff, you can get an F3 for about the same price as this. Now, that means, you know, that the F3s, yes, are they a fairly affordable custom option? Yes. But are they, and the Bodegas are also a very expensive production option, okay? So we're kind of, what, two worlds are colliding right here with these two knives. I personally love them both. Okay, so let's talk about sort of the overall, my overall take on this knife. Is this a knife that everyone should go out and buy? Obviously not, okay? Just the looks alone being as distinctive as they are, they're gonna put some people off. Not only that, but this is not the most practical knife that's ever existed. You know, it's fairly expensive. The finishes are highly detailed. There's a giant fuller in the blade that potentially can catch stuff. So this is not the most practical knife out there, but I don't think that Todd Begg is necessarily shooting for the highly practical knife buyer. You know, he'll leave those guys up to Lynn Anderson, who, you know, is going to probably have a better, you know, if you want something of this size and in this what would you say, similar role, you know, yeah, a Recon 1 is going to be much more practical. But the joy that this brings with the amazing detail, with the beautiful clip here, and the just you know, just extremely good fit and finish, the extremely attractive design, hand-rubbed satin, all the different things that this knife has going on, you know, those are the kinds of things, you know, this is essentially man jewelry, guys. And those things, if they appeal to you, then this is a great, great knife, because you're getting a lot of, you know, design and detail that you're only going to get outside of this on a custom knife. And I've said that before about Reate knives. If you want to try something that is, you know, getting close to the very best of what you can find in a knife, Reate knives are a great option for you, and certainly this one is no exception. So there you go. That's my overall take. This is a great option if you are a huge Bodega fan, if you're a huge Todd Begg fan, but don't want to spend the money for, you know, a mid-tech or a custom from him. I think this is a great option because it's definitely delivering a high level of quality in that Todd Begg design. And I think the quality from Reate knives is high enough that it justifies the collaboration. It'll be interesting to see if I can say the same thing about the Glimpse when it comes out shortly. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching. We will talk to you soon.